الله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. In the name of Allah, most compassionate, most merciful, all praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And once again I begin by greeting my brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, in the few minutes that we have, we're discussing the notion of self-image from an Islamic perspective, as well as how it is perceived in psychology. So when we say self-image, we are referring to, all of us have what we call an inner mirror inside our head. And when we say self-image, we are talking about the inner image that we have of ourselves when we think of ourselves. And this image is both a physical image and also the way that you see yourself as an individual. And the hope here is that we have a healthy, realistic self-image. And this all comes from a notion that the way we feel about ourselves is very important. And the way that we nourish ourselves is also very important. And our mental health is also very important. And it is crucial that as believers, to be sane, to be healthy, to feel good about ourselves, that is just part of it's an indication that you are in a good mental state, the way that you see yourself. And that is why it is also equally important to recognize that certain feelings are self-responsibility. Meaning, there is a level and amount of self-care, self-love, self-value, self-appreciation, and self-validation that I am supposed to give to myself. And I say that this is very important, especially to the sisters. Because remember that emotional dependency is the worst type of dependency. Please keep this in mind. Emotional dependency is the worst type of dependency, meaning that if I'm constantly waiting for somebody else to make me feel better about myself, it means that I have surrendered a lot of emotional independence to somebody else. If the way that I feel about myself is going to be determined what somebody else is going to say about me, then I have given that individual a lot of power. I have willingly surrendered a lot of my emotional independence to that person. So as Muslims, it is crucial just to live a healthy life, a decent life, a mentally sound life, to be aware that my self-image is going to be based on the kind of talks that I have with myself. Because remember that all of us are always engaged in what I call monologues. We are in a constant talk with ourselves. And the question is, what type of messages are you giving yourself? And what is it that you're waiting for from people? Now, it feels good to be told that you're a nice person, that was good, this was helpful, that's good. But remember, it's not people's responsibility to lay these foundations. We have these foundations as a personal responsibility, and the people that are around us, their job is to enhance this foundation, not to build that foundation. Maybe inshallah if I give examples, we can have a clearer picture of what I'm trying to convey. Al-Hakim fi Mustadrakihi, Hakim Naysaburi, tells a story that is related about Usama ibn Zayd. Said that one time the Prophet ﷺ received as a gift a beautiful gown And that gown one day belonged to Zi Yazan, the mighty king of Yemen. So the Prophet ﷺ put it on, and he looked very beautiful. He looked very beautiful in this. And the story says that it was given to him by Hakim ibn Hizam. The gift was given by Hakim ibn Hizam. Was not a Muslim at that point, and the Prophet ﷺ bought it from him. In any case, so he said the Prophet ﷺ put it on. Hakim tells the story. He said, I have not seen somebody more handsome, somebody more beautiful, where his face was so radiant, and that gown made the Prophet ﷺ even more good looking. He said, I have never seen somebody more good looking than the Prophet ﷺ in that gown. But then he said the next day, I'm walking in Medina, and that same gown now is worn by Usama ibn Zayd. So Hakim ibn Hizam looked at Usama ibn Zayd, as they say, from head to toe. And he's looking at him and he's saying, Anta ya Usama? Anta ya Usama? Talbas malabis Ziyazan? Said, you Usama, you are wearing the gown that one day belonged to Ziyazan. He's almost implying that you're not worthy of it. And Usama looked at him and he said, Wallahi inni khayrun min Ziyazan. He said, you seem to be impressed by this guy, but let me tell you, by Allah, I am better than Ziyazan. Wallahi inna ummi khayrun min ummi. He said, by Allah, my mother is better than his mother. Wallahi inna abi khayrun min abi. And by Allah, my father is better than his father. فَإِنَّا نَقُولُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَلَمْ يَقُولُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. He said, for I and my family, we say La ilaha illallah, but that guy and his family never said La ilaha illallah. When the scholars of Seerah, when they describe Usama, they say, وَكَانَ أُسَامَةُ دَمِينًا. Say that Usama was an ugly man. That's how they described him. They would speak about him having deep eyes, flat nose, thick lips. And this is not to say this is what makes people beautiful or ugly. But this was their definition of beauty and their definition of ugliness. At least the narrator of the story or the people who lived at that time. They said this is how they defined beauty and ugliness. So what we see here is that somebody was attempting to sell a negative self-image to Usama. And what he did is that he refused to accept this perception. He said that this is how you may perceive me, but your perception of me is not going to be a perception that I am going to adopt to myself. Are you following? Somebody has to be so extremely psychologically healthy for them to understand this. Some people, we get very sensitive when somebody is speaking psychology, because we think that psychology is un-Islamic and we should not really be saying this. This is unbelievably untrue. And just to make this point, let me give you two examples. Listen to this, subhanAllah. If you were to ask anybody, any Muslim, somebody who's read the Quran, memorized the Quran, say, what is the most common description of Jannah in the Quran? What does Jannah look like? What is Jannah like? Say something. What is Jannah like? Rivers. What else is in Jannah?
No thirst, no hunger.
No thirst, no hunger. Yeah. Somebody said, a group of people were asking and said, what's the first thing that you're going to do when you go to Jannah? May inshallah all of us be of the people of Jannah. So he said, man, when we go to Jannah, he said, I'm going to smoke a pound of weeds, inshallah. Some people said, what are you talking about? He said, hey, come down. It'll be halal, inshallah. So now, what does Jannah look like? So you get to see these images about Jannah in the Quran. But now pay attention to this. The most repeated description of paradise in the Quran is not a physical one. It's an emotional one. where Allah tells us in more than 10 places in the Quran, you just make it to paradise, and the first thing that you notice is لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. They shall have no fear and they shall not grieve. The first and the most repeated, the most beautiful thing in Jannah is what? Emotional health, psychological health. Because see, in this world, we're always the most common diagnosed disorder, psychological disorder in the world is mood disorders. And the most common are anxiety and depression. Depression is usually guilt and sadness over what went wrong yesterday. Anxiety is worry about what can potentially go wrong tomorrow. So we either become prisoners of our memories or we become captives of our imaginations. We are too sad about yesterday, too worried about tomorrow, we miss out on living today. So you say, make it to Jannah, you just make it to Jannah, and the very first thing that you will feel in Jannah is لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. They shall have no fear and they shall not grieve. So the most common, the most repeated imagery that we have of paradise, according to the Quran, not according to what we think the Quran is saying, we find out that it is actually the emotional aspect. Why is this important? See, if you are not doing well emotionally, there is no amount of physical joy that can make up for that. Are you following me, brothers and sisters? If you are not doing well emotionally, there is no amount of physical joy that can make up for the emotional deficiency that we are going through. Speak to somebody that just lost their child. Speak to somebody, ask somebody who just lost their child, and see if there is any amount of joy that can make up for their loss. And they will tell you, this is beautiful. Everything tastes good, but guess what? I can't feel it because of the loss that I have. Ask anybody who has a child who's diagnosed with cancer and tell them how much physical joy do you want to forget about that or to take your mind out of worry. They tell you, there is none. There is none. All of the depictions in paradise, in Jannah, will absolutely make no sense. There will be of no value if the person is not feeling well emotionally. Are you following? Not only that, the Quran takes it even further. Allah subhanAllah, you know, when you read this book, amazing. The Quran tells us, إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ وَعُيُونٍ. بعدين ونزعنا ما في صدورهم ادخلوها بسلام آمين ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل إخوانا على سرر متقابلين ادخلوها بسلام آمنين لا يمسهم فيها نصب وما هم منها بمخرجين. It said that indeed the believers are going to be in these springs and gardens. But then the Quran tells us, before you go to paradise, there is going to be a type of cleansing that you have to go through to truly enjoy paradise. What is that? Said that we shall take all kinds of resentments out of your heart. Think about people that you don't like. Actually, don't think about them. Don't think about people that you don't like. Let's say somebody has people that they don't like, and you're really looking forward to this dinner, to this gathering, and you just go there, and they happen to be the first person that you see them say, no, Wallahi haram. No, man. It's like everything was about to be so much fun until you just saw them. And the fact that you saw them, you are in the same gathering with them, what did that do to you? Just took away all the fun. Now imagine, said that You're looking forward to go to Jannah and say you find these people in Jannah. La, 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 la. Come on, man, not these people. The Quran knows this about us. So now the Quran says, oh, by the way, just in case you think you'll be feeling this way, نَزَعْنَا مَا فِي صُدُورِهِمْ مِنْ غِلٍّ. We shall, here is the beauty of this book. قال نزع. واستخدام القرآن لكلمة نزع هي دائما في إيش؟ يتشبث به الإنسان. قال يهب الملك لمن يشاء وينزع الملك ممن يشاء. نزاعة للشوى. Anything that somebody gravitates to or they grasp on, it must be taken and pulled forcefully. It must be taken forcefully. So then the Quran tells us that resentment in the heart must also be taken out of people forcefully. Why do people keep resentment? Well, why? It's not good for you. Resentment is not good at all. It's like poison. But yet, we keep it inside of us. So the Quran said, we are going to pull it, and we are going to pull it by force. And when you study human behavior, we find out that the only reason that we hold on to resentment because it gives us a false sense of moral superiority. As long as I hold this against you, I'm always winning and you are always losing. It is the unhealthiest human behavior that we are guilty of, holding on to resentment. So as believers, we appreciate psychology, but we want to appreciate Islamically principled psychology. And that's what we see in the Quran. We see these principles, and our job is to look into the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and take this, and that's where our understanding of psychology comes from. And this is not to say that, you know what, non-Muslim psychology has not contributed. We can learn so much from that as well. So going back to this idea of self-image, healthy self-talk, and not just adopting the type of images that people are selling about us, regardless of who us is at this point. And let me give you a quick example. It's an example that some of you may have heard me say before. If our information about Africa comes from TV only, if that's the only information that we know about Africa is what we see on TV, what is going to be our impressions of Africans? Walk around the street naked? We still we speak with clicks. What else do we do? We chase animals. We live in a jungle. Because that is the only image that is sold about us. I remember I was once taking religions of the world class, and when it came to discuss African religions, what is the biggest religion in Africa? What's the second one? You know what the class was about? Voodoo. It was about voodoo. Very small, minute, in West Africa, places like Benin, Cameroon, very, very small. That was taken into places like Cuba and parts of Haiti. Now they said that this is a representation of African religion and African religiosity. And I remember I just raised my, I said, look man, there are over 800 million in Africa, and you pick a religion that is practiced by less than 2 million, and you are depicting the entire continent on the basis of what is practiced by 2 million people. What kind of an image, what kind of a perception are you depicting about Africans? The same thing can be said about Muslims. If the only information that you have about Muslims is on TV, what would be your impression about Muslims? What are we? Terrorists, violent, and extremist. Say the same thing about women. If the only information that you know about women comes from TV, what kind of impression would you have about women? No, this is a question, by the way. Means talk. Objectified, yeah. Sexy, yeah. Always trying to lose weight, yeah. They nag men, yeah. What else? Emotional, irrational. Again, if you were to watch TV and only information that you get about men is what you see on TV, what would you find? And the list just goes on and on and on. So it's very important that you pay attention to this idea of self-image. Because here's what makes self-image important. The way we see ourselves is going to determine how other people are going to see us. The way you see yourself determines how people are going to see you. A woman who is overweight, let's say a woman, a young girl who is overweight, does she feel good about herself? And remember, she may be fine, she may just be totally fine, alhamdulillah. But TV is constantly telling her that she is not good enough the way that she looks. That's why, for example, 1 out of every 5 girls in the 4th grade has some kind of an eating disorder, anorexia or bulimia. Why is that? Because somebody is telling that physically you are not up to the standards that was set by somebody else. And the list can just go on and on and on about these things. So what happens in the deen, there is this idea of we want to make sure that somebody is feeling good about themselves. So in the Quran we read, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ خَيْرُ الْبَرِيَّةِ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إيش في آخر البينة؟ إن الذين كفروا إيش؟ أولئك هم شر البرية. He said those who have disbelieved and did wicked deeds, they are the worst of humanity. And then the Quran comes back and tells us إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات أولئك هم خير البرية. Those who have believed and they did righteous deeds, they are the best of humanity. خير البرية. And that is why, subhanAllah, this is so important. In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, المؤمن من سرته حسنته وساءته سيئته. Truly the believer is the one who rejoices the good that they do, and they are disappointed when they make poor choices. And here is a key to healthy self-image psychology. Healthy self-image psychology does not come from the color of our skin. Have no choice. Does not come from the fact that you are white or black or male or female or what ethnic background you come from, because these are all things that you have absolutely no choice or control over. We celebrate them. We may even appreciate the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us this way, but it would be very childish and very silly to actually take pride in these things and seeing yourself to be superior to people who do not have what you have. That would be absolutely childish. So the Prophet ﷺ said, to feel good about yourself is important. The question is, where does this come from? Where is this going to come from? So the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-mu'minu, truly a believer is the one, man sarrathu hasanatuhu wa sa'athu sayyatuhu, is the one that celebrates and rejoices the good that they do, and then they're disappointed when they make poor choices. And we find out that the quickest, the best way to truly feel good about yourself is by achieving these little accomplishments that you make. So the way that we feel good about ourselves comes from the type of things that we do. Wallahi, this is so crucial. And it would be nice if we can pass this on to our children as well. Because remember, when we live in a culture that is individualistic and that is constantly talking about self-esteem. And the question is, where does your sense of self come from? Where does that come from? Because where it comes from is going to determine what kind of a person you are. You can be very racist, you can be very arrogant, you can be very full of yourself, simply because of what you think or where your superiority comes from. So we are taught it is important to feel good about yourself, but be careful as to where that feeling of good comes from. And that's why they say, if the way we feel about ourselves come from any place other than our relationship with Allah, we are in deep trouble. If how we feel about ourselves comes from any place other than our relationship with Allah, we are in a very, very dangerous area. So the deen tells us the importance of it, but then. And also the Prophet ﷺ taught not to have these negative self-talks about the self. In the hadith it said that the Prophet ﷺ called upon Abu Hurairah and said, Abu Hurairah, come, Abu Hurairah. And Abu Hurairah did not come, and he came back after a while. And he explained to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya Rasulullah, kuntu najis. He said, Prophet of Allah, I was impure. Then the Prophet ﷺ, disappointed, he said, Subhanallah, al-mu'minu la yanjus. So don't say that. So, glory be to Allah, said that a believer is never impure. What Abu Hurairah meant is, for whatever reason, maybe it was a wet dream, maybe he was intimate, but the point is that he did not take the ritual bath, he did not make ghusl. And he felt that it was improper that he comes and speaks to the Prophet ﷺ, and that he speaks to him while in that position. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I know what you're trying to say, but these words that you used are not befitting. In other words, pay attention to the way that you speak to yourself about yourself. يقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يقل أحدكم خبثت نفسي ولكن فليقل لغثت نفسي. Said one of you, when they speak about themselves, they should not refer to themselves by saying that I am wicked. They don't say that, or somehow attributing evil to yourself. They say that I'm nauseated, I'm just not feeling well. But never use these kinds of words, because that would be a very unhealthy self-talk that you're having with yourself. That is not healthy. And remember, things that we repeat, we ultimately end up believing. So you want to repeat that which is good, and you want to observe that which is good, and you want to say things that are good. Not only these things to ourselves, but also to those who are around us. Subhanallah, the Prophet ﷺ said, despite of what people around him did, the Prophet ﷺ would point out the wrong to be wrong, but never at the expense of putting the individual down. That's a real man right there. The Prophet ﷺ would always point out the wrong, but never at the expense of putting another person down. And that's why we say that in our deen, the only time that we are allowed to look down upon a person is if we are trying to get them up. But never look down upon a person. And even when you want to correct, never end up making the person feeling good, feeling bad about themselves. Yeah, feel bad about the action, but not about themselves. Love the story of Sahih Muslim, in the hadith of Jabir. Jabir describing the Hajj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, كان الفضل رديف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said that Al-Fadl ibn Abbas was riding along with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a camel. And then he said that this is happening in Hajj on the day of Arafah. He said, فجاءت فتاة خثعمية. He said that a good, in some narrations, good-looking girl from the tribe of Khas'am came to ask the Prophet ﷺ a question. And then he described and he says that, وَكَانَ الْفَضْلُ وَسِيمًا. He said that Fadl, this young man, he said he was a handsome man. They speak about his hair. He was just, subhanAllah, naturally a very handsome, good-looking young man. And around this time, he's about 18, 19. He said, فَجَعَلَتْ تَنْظُرُ إِلَيْهِ وَيَنْظُرُ إِلَيْهَا. So he said that she was staring at Al-Fadl, and Fadl was staring back at her. Where is this happening, by the way? In Hajj, on the day of Arafah, in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu seeing this, he turned the face of Fadl away. And they say that woman repositioned herself. So she's talking to the Prophet sallallahu, but now she's staring at Al-Fadl and he's staring back at her. So the Prophet sallallahu turns his face the other way. She repositions herself. She's talking to the Prophet ﷺ, but she's staring at Al-Abbas, at Al-Fadl. And he's staring back at her. And said the third time the Prophet ﷺ really turned his face all the way there. And who was present? His father, Al-Abbas. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يا رسول الله لويت عنق ابن أخيك. Said, Prophet Allah, you really turned his neck all the way back there. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, قال رأيت شابا ورأيت شابا فخشيت أن يأتي الشيطان بينهم. He said, I saw a young man, I saw a young woman, and I was afraid that Shaitan was coming in between them. Some people are just saying, man, I can't go back to Hajj and revive this Sunnah, inshallah. Don't do that. Okay? But here is what we see, and what makes this story amazing to me is this is happening in Hajj on the day of Arafah in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and yet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would point out the wrong, but never at the expense of the person. فَاللَّهِ هذه أخلاق عالية. هذه أخلاق رفيعة. Especially where we live, we've got to use that gentleness of the Prophet ﷺ, that the way that we impact those who are around us, never approve of the wrong that people do, but also never lose the person. Similar story also narrated about Khuwait. Al-Tabarani Rawa. Khuwait is this companion who was known in his pre-Islamic era to be a player. He was a player. And they have a lot of stories about him and the kind of a player that he was. Said that one time, along with the Prophet ﷺ, said that they were camping somewhere, and then he said that when he was about to go to his tent, he saw a group of women. And said that he went to his tent, took a shower, dressed all nice, put some nice atar on, some nice scent, and he came and he sat and he was talking with the ladies, and he was really just chilling with them, and he was enjoying his time with them. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ passed by and he saw this and he said, Ya Khuwait, ma taf'alu ma'a niswa? He said, Khuwait, what are you doing with the ladies? And Khuwait said, I needed to make up something so that, this is embarrassing, I've been caught. So he said, قال يا رسول الله يصنعن لي حبلا لجمل شرود عندي. He said, Prophet Allah, the women are braiding a rope for me for a camel that just keeps running away from me. It was a very lousy lie. He knew that he was lying. The Prophet ﷺ knew that he was lying. The ladies there also knew that he was lying. And he said, I was truly embarrassed. He said, the next day, I am in Medina. He said, I'm in the market. I'm walking. He said, and I can hear the Prophet ﷺ behind me. قال فأسرعت. So that I started walking really fast. قال فأسرع النبي خلفي. قال فعدوت. To the point that I started jogging. قال فعد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خلفي حتى لحق بي. Until the Prophet ﷺ caught up with me. And he came next to me and he said, Ya Khuwait. He said, كيف حال الجمل? He said, Khuwait, I'm here inquiring. How's your camel doing? He said it was embarrassing. He didn't say anything. So the next day, the Prophet ﷺ was ahead of me and I was behind him, and he said that I started walking very slowly. I'm trying to avoid him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I walked so slowly, Prophet ﷺ slowed down, and then he finally, the Prophet ﷺ just turned and waited for me. When I arrived, he said, looked at me and said, Khuwait, كيف حال الجمل? He said, Khuwait, how's your camel doing? He said, فأطرقت. Just looked down and embarrassed. He said, the third day, I was inside the masjid. قال فسمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. I heard that the Prophet ﷺ came. He said, قال فأردت أن أطيل. He said that I decided to make this the longest salah ever. قال فجلس النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم جنبي وقال لا تطل فإني أنتظرك. So he sat next to me and he said, don't make it too long, I am waiting for you. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Prophet looked at me and he said, Kayfa halul jamal? How's your camel doing? See, there was no camel. The Prophet knew that there was no camel. Khuwayd knew that there was no camel. The camel became symbolic. And the Prophet is making a point here. Then he said, Ya Rasulullah, ma sharada mudh aslamt. He said, Prophet of Allah, that camel has never ran away since the day that I became Muslim. Giving assurances to the Prophet ﷺ that this was a one-time thing and he did not make any mistakes. But here is the point. The way that we deal with those who are around us, who may be engaged in things that they shouldn't be engaged in, Allah, is important. Especially with people having access to the kind of things that they have access to. You know, if we don't deal gently with them, I'm afraid that we lose them. And when we lose them, they're never coming back again. So in our correction, we can never correct to a point that that person feels bad about themselves. We want them to feel guilty about what they have done, but as far as us talking to them, it's always inspiring. It is always uplifting. It is always about, bringing back hope, and never be the cause of sending somebody to despair. Because I care for my brother's sense of self. Because I want to make sure that my brothers and sisters, regardless of the wrong that they are engaged in, that I want to deal with them in such a way that will never make them hate the masjid or never come back to the masjid again. Inshallah, one more example and I stop. So the story says that this man was in the masjid, and maybe some of you have heard the story before, but his phone rang during the khutbah. And he said that the person giving the khutbah was very upset, and he said, why do you all do this? Why do you do this? Had you been in court? If you were somewhere else other than the masjid, people would just turn their cell phone down. But you have no respect for the house of Allah. You have no respect for the khutbah. You don't have respect for the rest of it. And he just went on and on and on, just barraging the brother. Man felt very bad about himself, went to the parking lot, and he met his wife there. And his wife said, hey, who was the fool that left his phone on, by the way? And he said, man felt so bad. He decided that he just felt very depressed, decided that day he was going to go to the bar. The bar, just drinking himself, just absolute disappointment. He said that, and as he is drinking, he moves his elbow and he knocks the bottle or the glass of alcohol down. He said that the waitress rushed to him and she said, don't worry about it, sir. I'll clean it. Don't worry about it. Started cleaning it up, and then the manager of the bar came and he said, it's okay, sir, don't worry about it. Drinks are on us tonight because mistakes happen. Because he said, mistakes happen. That's not where the story ends. The ending of the story says, the man's feet never left the bar again, and his feet never made it to the masjid again. What happened? He said that in the process, somebody came and said, look man, mistakes happen. Chances are, we will catch each other making mistakes. Would you want to tell me, would you want me to tell you and say, look, mistakes happen, it's okay inshallah, you're better than this. Mistakes happen. Or would you want to barrage that individual to the point that they never want to come back again to the house of Allah? Because see, sometimes we don't pay attention to these things, and we literally become the cause of why people don't like the deen, they don't like Islam, and they want nothing to do with the deen anymore. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a healthy self-image, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us sound, emotional health, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair for your patience, and I apologize, I took more time than what was intended. And I believe that we have a panel, Yasir.
So the topic that we are meant to discuss is about the effect of self-image and of migrant parents on the new generation. It's all about historical image and how we can dissect that and look into our behavior, personal reactions, but also on how we react to different things, also in terms of our excellence in life in this country. So it was meant to be 45 minutes, but we only have about 10 minutes, so inshallah we will try to quickly discuss this issue with Sheikh Musa and also Sheikh Yasser. I will start with you, Sheikh Musa.
start with the
لا انا اوريدي دي يا شيخ انا تكلمت
من باب
لا لا
ابدا مستحيل
ابدا ابدا ابدا
جزاك الله خير
ابدا
الكبير يبدا يا شيخ الله يحفظك من باب التربيه
يا شباب انا I suggest that we at this point inshallah we do age before beauty so inshallah
لا حبيبي يعطيهم مجال للاسئله I'm just going to mention something in my mind that Allah Azza wa Jalla in regards to
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, just a thing, subhanallah, يعني, we benefited a lot, mashallah, from our dear brother Sheikh Yasser Fazaga, inshallah. I was trying to remember the surname, alhamdulillah. And about, subhanallah, how one can fit in, if that's the correct way to express it, within this community or within the country that you have moved to or that we currently live in, whether it's the UK or whether it's the US or any other country in the West that maybe our parents migrated to. And subhanAllah, sitting in the room, we were discussing a number of things, and subhanAllah, how parents come to this country, and the 5 stages. I really liked what the Sheikh mentioned, the 5 stages that one goes through when they migrate to the West. And subhanAllah, even we were speaking, subhanAllah, before it in the room about how we come here, for example, or any other country. I'm talking about, for example, the parents, and they will always have in mind that I'm going back in the next year, or they come back and have in mind that I'm going to bring my children, for example, study a few years, or we do this and that, and I'm going to go, and they're always investing in back home, as the Sheikh called it. Yes, back home. Yet that back home, that everything has been invested there, is never actually something that people, they live here for 20, 30, 40 years, subhanAllah, and throughout their life they were saying, I'm going to go back home, I'm going to go back home, I'm going to go back home, and their children, they were not belonging back home, and neither were they belonging here. Therefore, subhanAllah, I mentioned something that is, one should, there is a maqula, it says, I think actually it may be a hadith I'm not Mr. Shaw, which is what? عِشْ لِدُنْيَاكَ كَأَنَّكَ تعيش أبدا وعيش لآخرتك كأنك تموت غدا. Live for this life, for worldly things, as if you're going to live, or plan for this world, or for worldly things as if you will live forever, and plan for the next life as if you are going to die tomorrow. What does this mean? I'll explain the second part first and then come back to the part that's relevant to our topic. And that is, for the akhirah, you never know when you will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, one must be in the highest state and the best state of iman at all times in order for them to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a good page. And when it comes to the worldly things, for those people or for us that have moved to this country or in the West, we should live our daily life and the way we go about it in the UK or in anywhere as if we are living here. Don't give up the hope of one day returning to somewhere where you actually came from. And as the Shaykh said, you ask Allah to get that day where you will actually be somewhere where, subhanAllah, you actually your ancestors came from there. However, in the meantime, live as if you are, or plan as if you are here. Because some people, for example, they will stop themselves from interacting within the community. Some people will stop themselves from allowing their children to get too many friends, for example. They'll be like, no, don't, tomorrow, the day after, we go back, think of Jordan, think of, for myself, I'm Jordan, think of, I'm not saying it happened with me, everybody wants to the parents want to force their children in what they think or what they've been through. Whereas the child is in a very different world. And this is what happens a lot of the times with many communities. And I teach children, subhanAllah, and it made me realize when I'm in class with the students and I interact with them, they have a character. Especially when I try and get down to the level where I can understand them and they can open up to me. And then when their parent comes to pick them up, or if there is a parent day, subhanAllah, there is a new Muhammad. Who's this one? SubhanAllah, he's very polite, or he's very different, and he's, he puts the Maulana face on. Yeah? And it's very sad. Because the parent will see his child, mashallah, look at him coming to the duksi, as the Somali brothers call it, or coming to madrasa. But yet when he's out there with his friends, he has a total different character. And this is what it's called in Arabic, infisam shakhsiyya, in a way. That the person doesn't have a real character, he has no confidence, he doesn't even know who he is. Going back to the topic we spoke about earlier, they don't know what they're special in, or what they are. One character in front of their parents, and one character within their community. And the community, the character, that's the real them. Parents must try and relate to that. Also another thing mentioned, subhanAllah, the Shaykh mentioned that one should have an input. And don't only be the one that's taking, but have a position, try and achieve high so that people think, subhanAllah. And with this, you will be getting the reward if you have the niyyah that I'm doing this for the da'wah of Islam. However, I will mention something and remind myself and all the brothers of a hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is whether I am from Jordan, whether I'm from Eritrea, I know most of the brothers here from Eritrea, whether you are from any nation. And this is to do with the real identity, which is Islam. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says what? بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا كما بدأ فطوبى للغرباء. Islam started as a what? Stranger. It was only the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and a few people, and they started in secret. From fear of what the people and the harm that would have got to them. And Islam will return strange within the communities, within the countries, within the nations. فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاء. Tuba is a tree in Jannah, as mentioned by the ulama, that this tree, Tuba lahum, those people that are the strangers. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned them and gave them a description as the strangers. Does that mean I go and practice in a way that I am very far away from the community, very far, I'm a stranger, khalas? No. It is better that you indulge and try and integrate with your Islamic teachings without letting go of your Islamic identity, and people will still see you different. I'm not going to even say in the West. We were speaking, subhanAllah, about some of us come to the West and we get onto the deen more. We go back to home and you find out, subhanAllah, that the people of home which are supposed to be practicing Islam are far from Islam. And you are a stranger there, and you are a stranger here in a way. Therefore, I would say, go, inshallah ta'ala, with the advice that the Shaykh was giving. However, remember that there will be a percentage of strange feeling that one will feel, and that is the part or description or attribute that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to those people that he described as strangers. Wallahu a'lam.
I took too long, so forgive me, inshallah.
No, exactly. Maybe inshallah, if you don't mind, people who have questions or comments, inshallah, to further enrich this topic.
Would you like to tell us about the 5 stages that you talk about? The exciting.
Yeah.
So we'd like to go to this point, please. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Did you hear the question? No, I don't care. So what happened is the question is about the stages that immigrants go through or refugees go through. And this is not just about Muslim refugees. This is just refugees in general. And by the way, subhanAllah, very nice, interesting studies in sociology about migrants and integration and these things. And every migrant community goes through these stages. And what I was proposing is the first stage is that stage of excitement and people having a good sense of humor and people celebrating all little achievements. And then the second stage is people, they have a cultural shock and they become very depressed. And then after that, there is this cultural shock and people start trying to create a back-home-like environment mentality. And then after that, there is a cultural shock when people go back home and they're shocked and now they cannot really live back home. And then they come back here and they have to make that choice as to where is home. So one of our teachers, Dr. Hafid alayhi rahmatullah, he used to say, home is not where your grandparents are buried. Home is where you are raising your grandchildren. Listen to this. Home is not where the grandparents are buried. He said home is where the grandchildren are raised and they are brought up. And sometimes the tendency is, if I decide that this is not home, then I really don't care for any of the social ills. I don't care for any of the problems because I'm thinking that, inshallah, in a few years I'm going to go back. How many of us came here saying that, look, I'm just here to finish the university and then I will go back. And then you say, I'll just get my bachelor's and go back. And they say, I'm just going to get my master's and go back. And they say, I'm going to make some money, inshallah, and go back. I'm just waiting for my kids to, inshallah, just learn a little bit of English and then we will go back. And then, inshallah, they finish their elementary school and we go back. And then, inshallah, just do their high school and we go. And then all of a sudden, there is no going back. That's just a lot of wishful thinking that is taking place. But the danger here is that we become disengaged, like the Sheikh is suggesting. And you cannot really be relevant to our kids unless we know what is going on here. And please remember, knowing does not mean approving. I will say something and please do not be offended by it. You look into our activities, you go into any masjid. Who are the most people that are showing up in the masjid? Who shows up to the masjid? Huh? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The elderly. Old people.
Old people? Who shows up to the masjid? Men, right? Over 40, right? Overweight, just kidding, right? Okay, and mostly what? And mostly immigrants. Isn't that true? And they said, but wait a minute. And not only that, but it seems like even when we have programs, we are catering to the men over 40 who are also immigrants, even though there are more of our children here than there is of us. But yet the activities, they revolve around the culture that appeals to us. And we are a minority, by the way. I'm talking about the immigrant men who are over. We make up 90% of the people in the masjid, but the majority of the people are outside the masjid. But the masjid caters to this minority. What's dangerous here is, look, what may be appealing to this age group is not necessarily what is appealing to our kids. So what we do is that we're constantly appealing and catering to this group, and this is a beautiful group, by the way, don't get me wrong. However, in the meantime, we also need to be talking about challenges of the young group. Is marijuana a big deal in this country? Smoking marijuana, is that a big deal?
Yeah.
Is it a big deal? Have we had classes about marijuana? I'm talking, when I say these things, I'm talking about beyond saying it's haram. Are you following what I'm saying?
Beyond saying it's haram. Sexual activities. Have we had any talk about sex and sexuality in Islam in these places? No, we haven't. And I'm talking about beyond saying that this is haram. Because remember, sometimes it's not the absence of the knowledge of the law that is a problem. Do you drive a new speed? Are you not aware of what the speed is? You are aware, yet you violate. So I don't need to remind you of what the law is. I may do that, but that cannot be the only thing that I tell you about. And I love it when I bring these things up. I say, brothers, why don't we have a talk about sex and sexuality? Why not talk about Mirwan? Say, Shaykh, please, come on, man. We just want to keep our kids innocent. MashaAllah, tabarak. Alright, so let me tell you this. There is a difference between innocence and ignorance. We want our kids innocent, but not stupid. We want them innocent, but not gullible. Remember, knowledge is never the problem. The problem is ignorance and unresolved curiosity. That is where the problem comes from. But we refuse. We don't want to talk about these things. Why don't we want to talk about it? Oh, because you know what? Some brothers may not feel comfortable. Some brothers may not feel comfortable with it. But that's a much needed talk. You say, well, some people may not like it. And by the way, but see, if we talk about sex, if we talk about this, then we might be opening the door. Oh, so you're telling me that the Quran was wrong because the Quran does discuss sex, it discusses gambling, it discusses drinking. So was the Quran wrong? No, we talk about these people to enlighten each other so that we can make proper choices. But I need to empower my brothers and sisters, empower our community members so that we make the proper choices. And I need to fight battles that exist here, not back home. Brothers, are you following? I need to exist the battles that we are facing here, not try to resolve the battles that are taking place back home. And by the way, that does not make me disconnected, it just makes me realistic. This is what's going on here right now. There are many historical battles, intellectual and otherwise, that took place. Birmingham is not the place for it now. We have a different kind of battle locally that we need to be looking at. Is atheism an issue in this amongst young people? Are young people leaving Islam? Yes, they are, and we better be addressing this. Are young people getting engaged in things that they should not be engaged in? Yes, they are. So my job as a responsible entity that calls itself an Islamic center is to bring Islam into our lives in ways that make sense. Inshallah, last point I say and I stop, I promise you. I believe that Islam makes perfect intellectual sense. Our job is to make a cultural sense out of Islam. Meaning that I deliver Islam in a way that makes cultural sense. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمٍ. So that when the messengers were sent, they spoke the language of their people. I'm not talking language as in Arabic, English, I'm talking about they spoke the social language of the people because they delivered their message in a way that makes cultural sense. We need to deliver our deen in a way that makes cultural sense. And if we don't, I am afraid that we are going to see less and less of our younger brothers and sisters in the masjid. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them.
I wish we would have the time to discuss this in depth, but we don't have the time. Isha will be in 1 minute, maybe less than 1 minute now. I would like everyone, especially the youngsters my age, to look into this issue more in depth, especially engage with your parents. The behaviors that you see, anything that you might not approve of, is a result of an experience that they've been through. It's a result of so many years. It could be a result of trauma, it could be a result of pain that they've been through. And whenever they push you through, they're not pushing you through to be bad, or they're not trying to put pressure upon you, but it's more or less a reflection upon their past. So, Jazakumullah khair, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I shall leave in 1 minute, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair.